Yes.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, you know, all of you have been here before. Our purpose of putting the ESTEEM place together was so that instructors could actually see kind of the layout of the modules and see the look and feel of them, but your students don't actually ever come here. And so it's more for you to actually see what the materials look like, if you want to play around with them, if you want to experience them, and then to put them in your course. We have made very specific export packages for the 3 most popular LMSs, and we'll cover the LMSs later and some tips about that. But for those of you that have used the PTMT portal, some instructors actually send their students to the PTMT portal. But here you don't ever send your students to the ESTEEM portal. Okay, this is for faculty only. All right. So, the bigger goals of ESTEEM was for us to create online resources that integrate code app, that have examples of classroom videos of statistics teaching and learning. We saw that there was a huge gap when we wrote this proposal back in 2015, that, you know, we were hard pressed to find good videos of kids working in statistics. We really wanted to integrate much more rich multivariate data tasks, because doing statistics is much more than formulas and graphing, and it really is about exploring data. And we're firm believers that kids have much more opportunities to do interesting things related to statistics when they have data sets that are multivariate. And so that is kind of one of our core designs and goals. And we also integrate video interviews with experts in statistics education. We believe that there's been a lot of research and movement in statistics education that we're trying to put in front of our teacher educators and the pre-service teachers that the ESTEEM modules reach, so that without having to necessarily read articles or read different documents, they get a glimpse at some of the big ideas in statistics education. So we're trying to think about really utilizing an online multimedia platform to bring together ideas and experiences for students. So that's where it came into designing the modules and our approaches. And we, from some of our background kind of in PTMT, the preparing teachers to teach, preparing to teach math with technology, whatever that stood for, that we really, teacher educators, like classroom teachers, are professionals, and we do pick and pull and put together materials that make the most sense for our context and our students. So we highly value that professionalism, and we wanted to create materials that could be used in such a way by teacher educators to be able to do things that make the most sense in their course context. When, as you were hearing, the different contexts that we all work, they're very different. And so there might be some similarities, but you know, some might teach a stats class for teachers, but it's only for middle school teachers. Others teach it where it's across disciplines, something that's across disciplines. Others have things that are for only secondary teachers. So you want to do the things that make the most sense for your program and for your particular course. So continue on. We also know that that a lot of mathematics educators didn't get a lot of statistics education and statistics teacher education in their own teaching background or their own preparation to be a teacher educator. So thinking about preparing future teachers to teach statistics might be the last thing on your list of things that you have to attend to, because you know a lot more. You as in the general you, math teacher educators in general often know a lot more about teaching geometry and teaching algebra. They have much more experiences with those kind of concepts than many of the many math teacher educators. And so we're trying to put things together in a way that we hope are understandable and easy to use, and can have the best probability of getting into teacher educators courses as quickly and as easily as possible to then be used by pre-service teachers. So we are in our 5th year of this project. So we're in our no cost extension year. And so all of our modules have been completely developed, tested, revised, disseminated through different faculty workshops, and we've got a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. And we're now at the point where we luckily have some funds left over in our participant support, and this is why we reached out to you all to see if you could, if we could utilize these funds to help support another kind of cohort of faculty that would be able to get something out of this. So I mentioned the PTMT project. Some of you might also have accounts in the PTMT portal and may have been users of the PTMT materials. The first year of our project in ESTEEM, we were actually building from the former PTMT materials that were titled Data Analysis and Probability. So we started with those materials that were using software like Tinkerplots, Fathom, and Excel. And we jokingly called it that we were going to CODAPify them, because those software are going away. And we wanted to try to update those materials in a way that our base users of the PTMT materials could still use materials that they were somewhat familiar with because they had been using them with Tinkerplots and Fathom, but replace it with CODAP. And so our first year, we actually did a different versions of 4 chapters that used CODAP and some other online applets. And we made sure that the data sets that we were using were identical to the data sets that were in the last version of the Data Analysis and Probability. Again, we were trying to help that transition. So you might be familiar with that data and some ideas that come up with that data, but now just learning and using a different tool. So some of you may have on the PTMT portal actually used some of these materials. But the PTMT materials were never designed specifically to integrate easily into learning management systems. It was really left up to the instructor to get this PDF and to get these files and decide what they were going to do with it. And so we really were trying to rethink and come up with a different model for putting materials into the hands of faculty. So in comes our modular approach. So we have 3 different modules. Each module has 2 parts to it. And we designed this of, many faculty in many programs have maybe one, they don't have a stats class for teachers like some of you said you had. They have one methods class and they have to prepare their secondary teachers to teach everything in high school in one class. So we tried to design something that if you only had 1 or 2 weeks to give to the teaching of statistics, could we put some things in your hands that you could potentially use? All right, so the foundation module contains what we see as the starting place and should be the essentials. And we absolutely built the inferential reasoning module and the association module, assuming that people have done the foundation module. So if you choose to skip that, there are most likely going to be things referred to that your students are going to be like, I don't know what that's referring to or what that's talking about. All right. So you need to think kind of carefully about that if you choose to do that. So we also have 2 major assignments that we created. And the screencast assignment is basically a pre-service teacher doing a data investigation in CODAP, and they're screencasting while they do it. And that gives you a real glimpse at what they're actually able to do and how they're able to talk about statistics while they're looking at data. We feel that students could be ready to do that after they do the foundation module. The task design assignment, creating a lesson plan of teaching statistics, we personally do not feel that we've provided enough of a foundation in pedagogy in the foundation module for them to be quite ready to do a lesson plan. They need more than a week or two to be good at creating a stats lesson plan. So again, we're not saying you can't use it. Of course you can use it if you want to, but you might want to look into things in these other two modules that could be helpful in providing those foundations. So each module, I think I said, has two parts. Each part is about 5 to 8 hours of material. And then each part has 3 sections to it. And we tried to create those sections so that they had a similar structure across the modules. We have read and watches, so there's quick things to read, videos to watch, quizzes. There might be some interactive CodeApp things to do. There's always a really rich data experience. And sometimes there's a pedagogical investigation in there, not always. And then at the end, kind of synthesizing and apply. We have had people who have kind of reversed these read and watches and engage with data. So we structure it ordered in a module, but you can choose as an instructor what you want to use first or second or third with your students. One of the things that we did this summer was create an annotated table of contents. And so this is actually located, if I go into the ESTEEM place, we have it over here on the right-hand side. And this really should be a place that you're starting for planning, to think about what's in each module. So the first page just gives you an overview of the big ideas in each module. And then we give some more detail about the type of things that's in every single activity, so that you don't necessarily have to always go back to the place online to kind of choose, do I really want to use this this activity or not? All right. We try to give some time estimates so that you have a sense of if you were going to use this in class or assign it as a homework assignment, how long it might take your students to do it. You can also see if things are a discussion forum, or if they include a video, or if there's an investigative task with CodeApp involved in that section. All right. So I had 20 minutes to get through my introduction. It is now 4:20. So we should all write this down, that I named that soon in 20 minutes. Those of you that know me know that that's really a hard task. So anyway, I am passing it over to Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to be working with you for the next 30 minutes. We're going to dive into having you guys use CodeApp here in a couple minutes. So as Holly Lynn mentioned, this is the primary technology tool that we're using in our materials for a few reasons. One is that it's free and available online. So it's great because then when they get their own classrooms, it's pretty easy for teachers to start implementing it with their students. Second, it's fantastic. It's so user-friendly, and it really supports the statistics teaching in a way that we want to be teaching here in 2020. Use of large multivariate data sets, color, drag and drop interface. There's just a lot of advantages to it. So based on the survey that you guys did ahead of time, I have a little sense of where you are with CodeApp and how comfortable you are. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms where you're going to be placed with beginner and advanced, and then you're also going to have some folks from the ESTEEM team in there so that you can ask away any questions that you have. Not promising that we know every answer, but we're pretty good. And if we don't, we know how to get a hold of Bill and we can get back to you. So that's the key thing. The first thing I want to highlight, though, is in addition to getting pre-service teachers up and familiar with statistics, we also in our materials get them up and running with how to teach statistics. So I want to highlight that with the first CodeApp investigation that we have in our materials, which is 1.1G, investigating older roller coasters. So at the start of that activity, before they get to use CodeApp themselves, they watch a video of Holly Lynn launching a statistical investigation of this roller coaster data set that the pre-service teachers are about to investigate themselves. And it's important that through this, we are teaching our pre-service teachers in key aspects to address in the launch of a statistical task. And there are things about statistical tasks that are different than mathematical tasks. And so that needs to be attended to in the launch of these types of activities. So in this video, I think I need to, hold on one second. When I did my share screen, I forgot to click this share computer sound. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys a bit of it. And I want you to listen carefully to how the teacher, Holly Lynn, makes purposeful attempts to assure students have a strong foundation about the context of roller coasters and how that can help spark curiosity about variability among them. So see if you can pick up on what are some key aspects of launching a statistical task that we're trying to emphasize with these materials. So I'm going to our ESTEEM page, and I'm going to get to 1.1G. And there's a little intro that they can read, or you can talk with them. And then this is the video of Holly Lynn launching the task. And I'm going to start a little ways in.
Right, maybe there's a bigger population. So because we're going to be talking about roller coasters today, we're going to give you a sample of some roller coasters, and we're going to think about what we can learn about those roller coasters, and then maybe think about what that might be about all roller coasters. Okay. So I have a video. One of the first things that we're going to start out with is looking at some data about older roller coasters. Does anybody know in the U.S. when the first roller coaster was built? Approximately, maybe?
Yeah, like early 1900s.
Early 1900s. All right, they have been around. There have been some amusement parks since the early 1900s, and we've had roller coasters. What do you think those roller coasters were made of? Wood. Yeah? Wood. All right, they were made of wood. Okay. Are all roller coasters nowadays made of wood?
No.
No? What do you think?
No.
Yeah. What other kind of material might they use?
Maybe like iron, metal.
Yeah, some iron, metal, some things that are a little bit stronger. Okay. Well, we're going to take a look at some older roller coasters, and we kind of defined older roller coasters to be those that were built before 1980. All right. I am pretty positive none of you were born before 1980. Okay. But I'm going to show you a video of an older roller coaster that I rode when I was a kid at a place called Kennywood Park near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was called the Jackrabbit, and it's still in operation today. This is what like an old wooden roller coaster looks and feels like. So does this coaster look like it might be fun to ride?
Except for this giant chain lift.
Except for the chain lift here? What's going to happen now? What's going to happen now?
It's gonna go down.
We're going to go down, right? You got to go up to go down. The drops are the best. How many people get like that little butterfly feeling when you're something when you go through that blood drop? It's like,
There's a newer.
I know, I wrote it. I went there opening weekend. Okay, so on your handout, number 2 kind of asks you to think about what are some things that make roller coasters scary or thrilling? Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to ask you guys. We're going to try and get inside Holly Lynn's head. What were was she trying to accomplish in that launch? What were some things that she was trying to do to prepare the students for investigating data about roller coasters? And you can feel free to unmute yourself or chat. Either way is fine with me.
I think getting the students to notice the different aspects of a roller coaster, like the drops, the type, whether it's metal or wood.
Nice. Yes, you are exactly right. Those attributes of a roller coaster match up with the attributes about roller coasters we have documented in this CODAP data set. So getting them to naturally care and pay attention to those things. Other things?
You have a response in the chat box too.
Yeah, help students connect to context and what it might be like to ride a roller coaster if they weren't familiar. Yeah, so we can't always assume every student has ridden a roller coaster. So through that point of view video, which I learned, you can Google that on YouTube, and there's like point of view videos for basically a lot of roller coasters in the US. So you can get one that's close to where you live, make it, you know, relevant to the students where you're at. And also just help them personally connect, like to their experiences riding a roller coaster. Like she was talking about, like, remember that funny, do you get that feeling in your stomach? Like, you know, getting them to personally connect. So yeah, we think all of those things are really important in a launch. And so through this video and analysis of it, we're getting our pre-service teachers to be thinking about that. And then this links with the task design assignment in particular that we talked about, Holly Lynn talked about as one of the things that we've developed, because as part of that assignment, they have to describe how they would launch the task. And so through our materials, we're trying to develop their understanding of how to effectively launch statistical tasks. Okay, so now we're going to segue into you guys using CODAP. If I haven't mentioned, it hasn't been mentioned before, CODAP is an acronym. It stands for Common Online Data Analysis Platform. What we're going to do here in a second is I'm going to split you into breakout rooms. Again, there's a mix of beginner and advanced users here. And you're going to get a choice of if you would prefer to do the first investigation we have with roller coasters, which is the one you saw the launch for. That's definitely at more of a beginner level. Or if you're feeling more adventurous, you can do the one that's under 1.2G, investigating more roller coasters. Either way, when you get to that in the Moodle on the place, you want to go to where it says your assignment. And then there's two different things you're going to have to open. You're going to want to open the CODAP file itself, which is linked there, as well as either the Word or the PDF with the directions as to what you should do in analyzing this data set. So I'm going to send you guys to breakout rooms here in a second. Just give me a minute to create the rooms. All right, you're set. So you can just click in the middle of the screen. There should be an invite and have fun exploring roller coasters.
Hi, Stephanie. I think I got kicked out of my room.
Yeah, everybody did. I
Okay.
brought everybody back together. So I wasn't just picking on you, I promise.
Okay, thank you.
Talking very fast when that 60 seconds came up. We're
I
like,
know, just like my students. Oh my God. Well, like I was saying, Holly Lynn set a precedent of ending on time. So I feel like, okay, got to hold to it. I do have a few other things to share about this activity and how we designed our investigation. So I'm going to do that to wrap things up. So we wanted to point out to you as mathematics teacher educators, I thought it's helpful for you to know how we design these investigations and some things we did in designing them that you can bring out with your work with these investigations. So one is that if you did the first one, 1.1G, you might have noticed that when we first introduced the data, it's in case card view. And then from there, the data investigation switches to the case table view and looks at extreme attributes in the data set. Which one's the maximum? What's the minimum? And then from there, it transitions into, well, what would you say the ranges of the typical roller coaster with respect to this attribute? So this transition from thinking about the case to then what's specific cases that you care about to where's kind of the middle of the data, that's very common transition that students naturally take. We've learned from research with K-12 students that that's kind of the progression that they take naturally. And so we are modeling that with the way we structure this investigation. You also might have noticed that the investigation started by looking at one variable typically, and then switched to 2 variables, and then switched to more than 2 variables. So progressing towards a multivariate data analysis view and how we can do that in CODAP so well. Lastly, we really tried to keep these true statistical tasks by continually connecting to the context of the data. So that was brought out in some different ways. One is the map. Like our group had a lot of fun trying to find the roller coasters near us and talking about that. So these are real roller coasters and they're in real places. And also all of the prompts are stated.
Just really quick, Stephanie, for our group, that's in 1.2 investigation is where the map appears. Because we didn't get there.
Got it. Yep. Thanks, Madeline. And then all of the questions are stated in the context. So we're not just saying, what's the maximum? We're saying like, what's the maximum speed of this set of roller coasters? So everything is talking about this in the context of roller coasters. We have a few things to give you tips about because we've taught with these materials and we have used these with pre-service teachers. So some things to consider when you're using CODAP for the first time with pre-service teachers is to emphasize the drag and drop and the different places you can drag and drop things. Not just the axes, you can drag things to the middle, you can drag things to the right side axis, left side axis, bottom axis. Also, different things come up when you hover over them. So a couple examples that come to mind are if you hover your mouse over the attribute name, then you can see what that attribute is defined as. If you hover your mouse over the median line, it will give you the actual numerical value of the median. That happens for a lot of the measures. So making sure they know those hover at things. And also just that CODAP automatically adjusts their graphs based on the type of variables you put there. It also automatically adjusts the menus that come up. So what's under the ruler menu changes based on the type of graph you have made. Some tips for you, again, you do not have to be the end-all be-all expert of CODAP in order to use it with them. I certainly was not when I started using it with them. And that's okay. It's fine to be learning alongside with them. I think that's nice that you're modeling that it's okay as a teacher not to be the complete expert on a technology tool before you use it, but be familiar with it. Some difficulties we've noticed is that sometimes they struggle with open-ended investigations, like what? I choose the attributes I care about and I am going to make these questions myself. In fact, it's kind of funny. We found that like K-12 students actually do a better job of that than college students because they sometimes just have a different angle on what they're doing. So sometimes that needs a little help and they sometimes just need experience learning how to pose their own question. They're used to the questions being posed by other people instead of taking ownership and posing it themselves. And then just use of these large data sets sometimes can be overwhelming. Sometimes it can be overwhelming to CODAP too. We were having a little trouble with that in our group. We were breaking CODAP sometimes and had to start our graphs over. But just this idea of, oh my gosh, this is so massive, I don't even know where to start with this, can set in for some of the pre-service teachers. So, you know, again, I think a good go-to there is, well, what are you interested in? What do you care about? And honing in on which attributes will speak to that. And then building from there. Any questions about CODAP and the data investigations we have? we've highlighted the data investigations in the foundation module, but we definitely have CODAP data investigations in every single part of every single module that we've written. All right, Tag, you're it. Next.
Okay, so we've been spending a lot of time sorry. All right, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the roller coaster task, and so a natural question might be, you know, how do students think about using the roller coaster task? Why isn't this giving me presenter view? Somebody help me here? What am I doing wrong?
I think hit escape to get out of yeah, and then present on the top right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Got lost there for a minute. All right. So, you know, some natural questions that we might want to discuss are, how do secondary students think about using the roller coaster task? How can teachers help support students as they engage in this task? And this roller coaster task, these two data sets kind of form a basis for a lot of the pedagogy that we discussed throughout the foundation module. There's several videos that focus on different aspects of some lessons that Holly Lynn has led with middle school students. And so we saw the launch that Stephanie showed earlier there. And so we're also going to get the opportunity today to view another video where we're going to see how Holly Lynn, as the teacher, orchestrated sort of a whole class discussion that focused on students' thinking and students' reasoning. And so we're going to watch this video in a minute. And as we do, I'm going to give you 3 questions here that I want you to focus on. So first, what do you notice about the students and how they're thinking statistically? Think about, how does the teacher sequence the students' work? So Holly Lynn, as the teacher, actually shows how the students will present their thinking. So I want you to think about what motivations, what kind of reasoning do you think she may have had to have the students present in the way that they did? And how does that account for the different student approaches to the data analysis and interpretations that they were making? And then third, how does the teacher use student ideas to make connections between the statistical ideas? So I'm going to start this video, and then we're going to start a little ways in here.
So they created 2 graphs. All right, tell us about your graphs and what you found out.
We found out that the top thriller dragster in Cedar Point, that's in Ohio, has the highest drop and the highest speed.
Oh, okay. So you created these 2 graphs, and then you looked at the one that was. Did you click, when you were clicking on the dot, did you click on the dot in the drop, or did you click on it in the top speed?
The top speed.
In the top speed. So you clicked on it in the top speed, so you know, find the one that goes the fastest, and then you noticed that it also had the biggest drop. All right. Do you think that that's true on the other end? The one that's the smallest, that has the lowest speed, also has the lowest drop?
No.
No? All right. So, did you test it out? Did you look?
No, but
no?
now I'm tempted.
Now you're tempted? Well, go ahead. Click on one of those low speeds, and let's see where it is.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's down there. All right. So if we don't have a lot of speed, we probably, in this case here, we didn't drop very far.
Okay.
And so what we did was we got the top speed. So we did the top speed and the drop. And we put the drop in the middle of the thing. And then that's what ours looked like. The darkest green meant the biggest drop. The lighter the green was the lowest the drop was.
All right, all right. So, so they used that color like you guys were doing, but they had top speed on the x-axis. And so this graph kind of tells us some of the same information that the two graphs made, but it's all in one graph, all right? And we were using color to kind of show the intensity of drop. Nice, thank you.
We also did something with the max height, but for some reason the two at the top, it didn't show. So we thought that they probably weren't running anymore, so that's why it wouldn't show them there, and only the Fury would show.
Oh, I wonder if we just needed to, so with the max height, did you put it like where you have top speed on the x-axis? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Go ahead and drag max height on there.
Oh, and it was just having some fun, so we were just looking at what was on North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
So, and I think it was Fury 35 or something like that, and something else.
Intimidator. Yeah.
And Fury 35 was like one of the best ones in max height and top speed and dropping.
Yeah, that coaster looks crazy. So while they're doing this, from some of the things that you've learned so far, we had 157 roller coasters from the U.S. Do you think those are all the roller coasters in the U.S.?
No.
No. All right. There's actually a lot more. I'm not even. I'm not even sure that how many there are, but I think it's over 1,000.
I didn't even see anything.
Okay. You didn't even see what?
My favorite roller.
You didn't even see his favorite roller coaster. So we don't have them all. We have a sample of them. Okay. And we're learning some things. And one of the things we just looked at was top speed and drop. And we were it was fun to kind of find out that special coaster that was like had the top speed, the highest speed in our data set, and the largest drop. But we don't know if that is the largest with top speed and drop. All right. All right, yeah, so, and again, they were looking at drop and top speed, but they arranged the graph a little bit differently. All right, can you tell us a little bit about your graph?
Well, we were just playing around, and we were comparing drop and top speed, and then I added in type. And this is how we came up with this graph.
Okay. So does anybody know what this kind of graph is called?
Also, animated crane gifs.
So yeah, we can drag and change the axis. This is called a scatter plot, and you're going to learn more about that later. All right, but this is called a scatter plot, where you actually use two different variables, but in a very specific way, where one is on the x-axis and one is on the y-axis. And what they did was they put the type with wooden versus steel overlaid here. So steel is green, and wooden is like pink. Does that tell us any new information? What do you think that tells us?
Well, back on over time, it's changed like since like in the 1900s when they started making them. Like it might not have been so safe. It's like more you go to like so they stopped making wood and steel.
Okay, so a lot of our newer ones might be made of steel. All right, over time, they do still make wooden coasters, but they tend to reinforce them with steel.
Yeah.
All right, so there's steel in them. You know. All right, what can we tell from this graph about wooden and steel coasters?
Yeah. There seems to be more steel coasters than there are wooden.
All right, there seems to be more. So in our data set, there seems to be more steel coasters than wooden coasters. I see more green than I do pink.
Wooden coasters seem to be like in the same range of drop.
The wooden coasters all seem to be kind of clustered together in the same range of drop. All right, so there's this big cluster of pink.
Because roller coaster makers, before the steel coasters were introduced, they all, well, except for that one, the high-speed roller coaster,
Yeah.
they all wanted to make their coasters fast, but they didn't want them exciting and stuff, but they didn't want to make the coasters dangerous because they would lose customers.
Yeah.
So they all built them around the same range. That's like the maximum of wood's potential before becoming not structurally sound.
Yeah.
And then once steel was introduced, people started going further to either side.
Yeah. Yeah. So they started having. And do you think that how far you drop maybe has anything to do with the speed of the coaster?
Yes. Yeah.
If you've got a pretty big drop, that gives you...
Gravity creates momentum.
That's exactly right. Our gravity's going to create some momentum and you're going to start going faster, all right? And so probably you hit your max speed either on that drop or shortly after that drop, all right? Okay, good. Thanks, guys. Thank you for coming and recreating this. So,
Okay. So for those of you that are familiar with the 5 practices for orchestrating math discussions, we've kind of adapted this to also think about statistical discussions, right? And so as you think about these 5 practices of anticipating, monitoring, selecting specific students to present, sequencing those responses so that they can be publicly displayed, and then trying to make connections between the student responses. The video we just watched really kind of focuses on these last 3, right? The selecting, sequencing, and making connections. So, you know, Holly Lynn as the teacher here made those specific choices, and it's related to the professional noticing framework as well, because you have to attend to how the students are thinking, interpret what they're doing, and then respond to the students throughout, right? So I'm going to give you a few questions, and we actually embed these questions in the ESTEEM modules in a discussion board. And so there's a number of questions that students have the opportunity, students in this case, meaning pre-service teachers, have the opportunity to respond to. And so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here to discuss what you noticed about the students' thinking, maybe what you noticed about how the teacher, in this case, sequenced those students' work, and how she used the students' ideas to draw connections between statistical ideas. So for those of you that are participating, what did you notice in the video?
So the students went from like talking about the tallest coaster and the fastest coaster to talking about, you know, the connection between max height and max speed. So kind of linking, instead of just looking at one variable for one coaster, sort of thinking about it. And they also talked about wood and steel and how that affected speed as well. They're making connections across variables.
Yeah, all three of the groups in one form or another were comparing speed and drop, right? That was the question they were kind of investigating, right? What did others notice about either the students' statistical thinking or how they were sequenced?
The sequencing went from seeing a single data point to seeing like a single observation to seeing a little bit more bend to, like they were building in their multivariate thinking as they progressed through the graphs. So you looked at the first pair and they were just really attending to one individual data point, and then the second group was looking at 2 of them at the same time, and then the third was looking at that scatter plot, so building in that dimensional thinking.
Right. If you think about the first pair, they had 2 different dot plots, right? And Holly Lynn even had to ask them at one point if they had looked to see if the roller coasters with a higher speed also had a higher drop, right? So they were sort of used 2 unconnected graphs, at least in their mind, right? With this second group, they had a dot plot that they were working with, and they had overlaid the color to be able to make comparisons, right? And then finally with the third group, they had a scatter plot and then overlaid a third variable. So there is sort of that progression of the representations, right? Of how we analyze 2 variables throughout all 3 students. They were representing the data in different ways, but kind of did show a progression. I think that can really lead into a good discussion about how we sequence those students' responses. And so it seems to make sense in this case to sequence them so they do progressively get a little bit more interesting, I guess. So this is an example. I mentioned this is embedded in a discussion board. This is an example of one of the pre-service teachers. And they actually noticed this, right? The first sentence pointed out that they see a progression of graphs that compare the same attributes, top speed and drop height. A little bit later there, it says students move from special cases to more generalization about the group as a whole. She did this by asking the students to extend their thought process and see if the minimum in both categories were also similar. Later on it says this allowed the students to go further in their analysis by comparing 2 groups, but also opened the door for a higher level interpretation. The students made claims and began to think in the context of the problem, discussing the possible danger of wooden coasters at high speeds. They looked at the cluster of wooden roller coasters and discussed the lack of variability. So this is a type of example student response that they are looking pretty deeply at how the students were thinking about the data in this data set. So I'm going to transition to thinking about some of the big ideas that we have in the foundation module, and that kind of bleed into a lot of the other modules in the ESTEEM materials. So in preparation for today's webinar, we asked you to read the very first reading that pre-service teachers read in the ESTEEM modules, and it focuses on this big question. And so I have a question for all of our participants. Based on your reading, how would you answer this question? How is mathematics different from statistics? So what did you learn from your reading? Anybody?
So the role of context, like I definitely think mathematics can have context, but it also can be context free. But statistics, you really are going to have context no matter what.
Right? Context can kind of shed light on the data. We want to be sure that statistical questions are embedded in a context. What else did we say in that first?
The role of variability.
Variability. So conclusions in statistics are never really certain, right? They're based on evidence, as opposed to in math, where we may base our claims based on deduction and proof. You know, a lot of times in math there may be one answer. That's not the case in statistics, right? We're just looking for evidence. And then the third big thing was issues of measurement. What did we say about issues of measurement in that first reading?
The measurement in mathematics is often straightforward. You know, measuring speed or height or volume, etc. There's like a straightforward measurement unit, and learning about how to be precise with your units, versus statistics, the thing you're measuring may not have like a straightforward unit to measure with.
Yeah, a lot of times in stats, it's more abstract, right? How we measure things. In math, it's, like you said, very precise. So as we think about what are some of the big ideas, these STEAM modules are designed throughout to embed these sort of fundamental ideas and really our beliefs that we feel about teaching statistics. One of the big ideas we want students to recognize is that statistics involves a cycle of investigation. You can see it there on the right-hand side. The 4 phases of a statistical investigation might include posing questions, collecting data, analyzing that data, and then interpreting the results. And this cycle of investigation we bring up throughout a lot of the materials. We're involved in different phases and multiple phases. We introduce a number of statistical habits of mind. We want students, I guess we want our pre-service teachers, but we also want them to recognize that secondary students should develop these ways of thinking about statistics. And they actually build on some of the differences we just talked about, that we always need to consider the context, right? If we talk about the number 33, 33 has a different meaning if we're talking about the age of a mother when she first has a child, which is very typical, than it does if we talk about the number of points that a player scores in a high school basketball game. That would be really high, right? So a number depends on its context. As we think about measurement, we want students to be conscious about how the data was measured, about how to develop meaning about how it was measured. We have already talked about variation and uncertainty, and that we seek to explain, predict, and control variation when we do data investigations. We need to attend to sampling issues and try to avoid biased samples, right? Students should understand that random sampling and the size of a sample are important to the conclusions that we can make. We've already seen with CODAP that visual and numeric representations of the data are really important. And a common theme we want students to recognize is always to try to be a skeptic, to look for flaws in a statistical argument or in the way that an investigation was designed. We want to think about what are the motivations or the objectiveness of a writer. Do we really trust what's being said? Stephanie mentioned some of this earlier, I think, where she was talking about using real large multivariate data sets. That's something that we used in the design of the ESTEEM materials, but that we also want our pre-service teachers to take away. That if you think about what's often taught in the secondary curriculum, a lot of times in secondary textbooks, you may see 10 to 15 cases and only 1 or 2 attributes. And you can see already that we're talking about much larger data sets in terms of number of cases and attributes that can be analyzed with tools like CODAP. All right, I was going to give us some time here, but I'm running out of time. So if you think about these different habits of mind and how we engaged in them when we either did the roller coaster or we saw it in the video, I'm sure you can think about the ways that these habits of mind showed up, right? For example, visual and numerical representations, that's something that we talked a lot about when we were doing the roller coaster investigation. I know one of the questions that has come up in my class when we've done the roller coaster investigation deals with measurement, that second habit of mind. How do you measure the maximum height? And so this question has come up in our class because most people assume that it's the height from the ground, right? But I've also had students that have questioned, well, does that mean that if we start at a level that's above the level of the ground, or would that be a different way we could measure the height? Or does it mean from the highest point to the lowest point? So just an example of one of the ways that we embedded a conversation about measurement when I've taught with these modules. All right, the last thing I'm going to discuss, and I'm just going to point you here, is the C-DIST framework. And so if I come out into the Moodle, it's in section 1.2.c where we start to talk about tasks. And one of the big things we want our students to take away is to have considerations that they need to make when they're designing a task. And so this gives a number of questions that pre-service teachers can think about. And this is critical, especially if they do the task design assignment later on. They can refer back to these considerations. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and let someone else continue.
So I think the tag goes back to me. You know, here in North Carolina, or where I live, with my kids with remote learning, they don't ever have 2-hour classes. They have, you know, 45-minute class or an hour class. So I know that you all have been sitting and participating with us for quite a while. We also do something called Wellness Wednesday, where the kids actually get a break from the screen. But, you know, if you would like to stand up and stretch and, you know, move around and even use your, turn your video off if you would like, you know, let's take a breather. And so I'm going to give everybody a 30-second breather of stand up, stretch, and then come on back in. Okay, so for the next portion, Stephanie and I are going to go fast and furious to give you a little bit of a glimpse into the inferential reasoning module and the statistical association module. In no way are we going to be able to tell you everything, but we just want to give you a little sample of it, if you will. So in the inferential reasoning module, we really focus on the role of questioning and how questions and tasks promote inferential reasoning. And we very purposely chose to label this and to focus on inferential reasoning rather than how do you teach inference. All right? We are not focusing on how do you teach your students to do a t-test. So that is not the purpose of this module. It is not about formal inference tests. It is about how do you promote inferential reasoning as a very a staple of statistical reasoning. So we very much focus on these next two lines here, how models, modeling, and simulations support inferential reasoning, and what the role of samples, sampling, and your sampling distribution has in the ways that one reasons inferentially. So we worked with one of the things that not sure we mentioned early on is that Bill Finzer is a co-PI on this grant because throughout this entire project, our team has actually been designing features of CODAP that are now in existence in that software. So we have design discussions with him, and we build components and design it out, and then he goes and builds it with his team. So the sampler plugin is one of the things that we added that our project paid for to get developed into CODAP. And we're going to actually get to play with that in a little bit. So to do that, we're going to engage with an activity that's in the very beginning. It's a read and watch activity in the inferential reasoning module. And it really is focusing on how do you use models to build inferential reasoning. And I have this quote here to kind of get us started, that modeling, the process of modeling is really kind of is this translation process of understanding the assumptions of a contextual situation and coming up with a way to mathematize it and coming up with a working model. And that a model, in this case for statistics, can be enacted through a simulation. And then being able to validate that through how empirical data might fit with what you were kind of expecting. So we're gonna use that to think about a situation. So we do this situation in 8.1 where to illustrate the modeling process, we've come up with a very simple real-world situation. Many of us at different fairs have probably experienced the floating rubber ducks in a pond. And in this particular game, 20% of the ducks are supposed to be marked on their belly for a prize. And if a player picks a marked duck, they win a prize. So the rules of this duck pond is that the kids don't get to keep the ducks, all right? Once a duck is picked, it's returned to the pond. The booth operator swirls them around and before they actually pick again. So thinking about this with probability, it is a with replacement situation. So I pick a duck, I see if I won or not, and I put that duck back in. So my population of ducks is never changing. Each player pays $1 to pick 3 ducks, and the booth owner expects that the time that they're going to be open, that about 50 students will probably kind of come by and play that game. All right, so that's our situation. So what are some questions we might kind of wonder about with that situation? If you have this kind of duck pond and you're the owner of the booth, what are some things you might actually wonder about? Anybody have any ideas?
Will you make money?
Yeah. So what might be some factors that I need to pay attention to about whether or not I'm going to make any money?
How much each prize will cost?
Yeah. So how much whenever I'm stocking up my booth, how much am I going to pay for each of those like stuffed animals that I have a gazillion of in my home because we go to fairs all the time? How much do I have to pay for actually all of those? What else? If you need to charge a different price to play, all right, that's from Kayla in the chat. All right. What do you mean by that, Kayla?
Sorry, I have a lot of background noise because I'm not at home. But so once you've kind of thought about your prize situation, if it's going to cost more than you expected on prizes, you may need to go back and reevaluate how much you're planning to charge someone to play. So you may have to go back and kind of readjust that.
Mm-hmm. And why would I, so I buy all my stuffed animals and I get some experience of people playing my game. What might indicate to me that I have, I need to change my price? What would be the outcomes that you might notice?
Everybody's winning.
Yeah. So you know, what if everybody is winning at my, you know, so they each get to play, they get to pick 3 ducks to pay $1, you know. What I'd kind of like to know, you know, so if I expect 50 students to kind of come and play, so like for every 50 students, how many prizes should I really, what's reasonable to kind of expect to give away? And am I giving away too many? You know, is there too many being won? So we could use, so I can't remember if it was Deborah or Cynthia, somebody was saying that they started with probability in their class this semester. You could absolutely give this task and ask some questions, and some of the answers could be done by computing some probabilities. But we're not going to. We're going to actually instead use a modeling approach. So I have a couple questions here. So, you know, how many prizes should they be prepared to give away after 50 students play the game? What variation might we expect after 50 students play? You know, how many of the kids will win like no prizes, 1 prize, 2 prize, 3 prize? And at the end of the day, if there were only 10 prizes won, do you think the owners were telling the truth about 20% of the ducks being marked? Like, what would surprise you, you know, on either end, low prizes or high prizes? So what we're going to do, super uber duper quick, is I'm going to go into CODAP here, and I'm going to do a new document. And so I'm going to create a new document and show you that there is a plugin called a sampler. There's actually several plugins here, and some of them are actually pretty new. These are both portals that pull data in from other sources, and you can do sampling activities from them. So in my sampler, if I wanted to model, let me go back here. If I want to model the fact that there's 20% of the ducks are marked with a prize, and I have a CODAP sampler here, I want you to think about this as like a big bag of marbles. So if this is a big bag of marbles, how many in each of these, or a big pond of ducks, how many ducks might I put in here if I want to create a model of my duck pond?
100.
Okay, so I could put 100 ducks in here. And so I could just start adding, cancel. So I could just start adding with the plus, all right? I'm going to actually change this one to be win. And we know that we're also going to have some ducks that lose. All right. And I'm doing that just to kind of anticipate. So I'm going to do 1 to 100. Oh, and actually it populated 1 through 100 here. And I could then go in and change. I need to make sure that 20% of these are marked as winning and 80% are marked as losing. So we could go through here and we could change these. I'm going to actually clear this. Cancel. Oh, I think I have to refresh. I'm going to reload the sampler here. Get a new document. Sorry. So instead of 100, I'm going to reduce that task and put 10 in here, just for time's sake. So I'm going to create a model of my pond, and I only need 20% of them to show as a win. And I'm doing this super quick, and I would have a much deeper conversation with students or teachers. But making sure that they kind of understand the way that this bin of marbles actually is a model for the duck pond. All right. I could have also done 5 balls with 1 win and 4 lose. All right. So thinking about different ways that I could actually set this up to model it. So in our task, we have that you pick 3 ducks and that we expect 50 students to play. So now we've got to pay attention up here that how many of these ducks are we going to pick at a time? Well, the problem tells us we're going to pick 3 ducks at a time. And we're going to, how many samples do we want to collect? We want to collect 50 samples. So I'm going to at first set this to be 1 so that you can see what's happening here. All right, I played and I lost. I didn't lose 1. I didn't win 1 darn thing. Lose, lose, lose. Ah, lose, lose, lose. I'm the worst duck pond player ever. Ah, look at that. Wow, I'm just the big fat loser. They're making lots of money off of me. Okay. So I'm going to clear the data. And now I'm going to set this to be 50. And I'm going to have 50 kids come and play. And I'm going to speed that up for you. So the sampler creates what's called a hierarchical table. And I did 1 experiment with a sample size of 3. And I repeated that 50 times. So I have 50 samples. And so, for example, this is, oops, I don't know why that's coming up. That's sample number 43. And woo, I won a prize. That person, sample number 43, won 1 prize. Okay. And so if I think about starting to make some graphs, I overall, out of all 50 of these students, how many prizes were won? 22. All right, 22 prizes were won. Okay. I can start computing some things. So at the sample level, for each sample, I'm going to add an attribute. And we're going to add an attribute so that it is, I want to find out whether within a sample you win 0 prizes, 1 prize, 2 prizes, or 3 prizes. So I'm going to call this attribute how many prizes. And now I need to write a formula for it. So this is where our students start using some computational thinking to think about how they can help themselves answer some of these questions. So how many prizes? What I want to do is to look in value. Oops. I want to count, let's see, what is my formula here? I want to count, count value equals win.
I think capital W, I think matters.
Oh yes, because I used a capital. Thank you. All right, so I looked over here and so I'm going to create now this graph. So in my sample of 50, there was one sample where they won 2 prizes. Nobody won 3 prizes. And that was in my very first experiment of 50 students. So what might happen if I do another one? Oops. So I can use these different labels here as part of the variables in my problem. So I now have 2 plots stacked on top of each other for my first experiment, which is in orange right now, of the first 50 students and how many prizes, how many times nobody won anything, 1 prize was won, 2 prizes was won. And then in my second run of 50, if I did that again, this is the distribution that I get. I can run it again and again, and I can start computing these. And so in our material, so I'm going to stop because I got to stay on time, you know, and pass this over to Stephanie. But in this activity, we actually have, this is one of our activities where we have the sampler. What I showed you all was actually building up how to do this with the sampler, but we have this sampler already embedded in the page, and all of your students have to do is to hit start, and it's going to start generating and graphing for them. But I wanted to show you all kind of how to do this. So they actually get to play with CODAP within a page in your learning management system. And I'm going to speed that up. So in this round of 50 samples, we gave away a total number of 31 prizes. And we do it again.
Helen, do you mind if we switch to me?
Absolutely, I do mind. I'm going to keep going. No.
Take it.
Kidding.
Give her the power to do that.
I'm kidding. So
I feel worse for Taylor. He's at the very end.
Yep. But we talk a lot about how inferential reasoning is in the standards, and this is also one of the activities where we try to make that connection explicit. So I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie.
I fully expect to have 2 minutes left, so I plan for that. So take your time, Stephanie.
I promise I will try not to do that. Okay, so here's the Fast and Furious talking through our statistical association module. So Rick and I took the lead on this. This was really fun to work with Rick on this. So often the most important and interesting questions we have about data are about associations, because we want to know, is there a relationship between 2 attributes, and could that help explain things that we know about the context? So I think statistical association is a really interesting topic. Luckily, some big wigs in statistics education, Burrell and Buehler, called it a fundamental statistical concept. And it's also in lots of the content standards at both middle and high school level, in Common Core state standards for math and lots of the state standards as well. So we've organized our module into 2 parts. B.1 is about statistical association of categorical variables, and the second one is on quantitative variables. That was very purposeful ordering. We feel like coming into our courses, students know a lot more about statistical association of quantitative variables with things like scatter plots and line of best fits than they do about statistical association of categorical variables with things like two-way tables and segmented bar graphs. And the reality is there's so much data out there that's categorical is really prevalent. So it's absolutely important. So we wanted to foreground that by putting it first. We've got a lot of things that we pay attention to in the association modules that I want to highlight. So one is that we do pay attention to developing their content knowledge with categorical variables, much more so than we do developing content knowledge about statistics and the other areas. Again, we don't feel like students know a lot about analyzing those. So we start off with the whole activity where they just learn what are categorical variables, how do we look at them numerically and graphically. We also really develop their knowledge of content and students for teaching statistical association. So those of you familiar with the mathematical knowledge for teaching EGG, it's on the pedagogical knowledge side, and it's all about what do students naturally think about and do when they are analyzing this type of data. So we document this work in 4 different ways. We have actual documented written student work. We have videos of students when they're getting interviewed. We have videos of students working in classrooms, and we have animations of actual classrooms that we put into animations. Just to talk through what some of these look like. In B.1D, we learn what students do when they're asked to graph categorical data, when they're coming up with their own graphs. What do they naturally gravitate to? We get videos of the work, and their transcript shows what are the graphs that they actually made. We make an animation of a class session about students learning about line of best fit. We also have a video in B.2G where a whole class session is using CODAP to investigate vehicle data set. And that's another data set that our pre-service teachers work with themselves. We also pay a lot of attention to developing their professional noticing in this module. So those of you familiar with professional noticing of students' mathematical thinking, we are trying to develop their ability to attend to, interpret, and respond to student thinking. So for example, in B.1, where we focus on categorical data, we teach them in B.1, B, and D, what are natural ways that students analyze categorical data. And then as a culminating assignment in B.1G, we ask them to look at some videos where students are trying to make sense of segmented bar graphs. And then in this assignment, these pre-service teachers get asked to interpret what they're seeing and how would you respond to these students? And Rick and I got these videos from our summer 2017 study with some middle school students. There's nothing out there like this. We had to create it ourselves. So we hope you can find that a useful reference. We also build on the work from other modules. Like Holly Lynn said, we think it's really important to do the foundation module first and then we build on it. So some ways that we do that include this discussion where we talk about differences between mathematics and statistics in the study of association. So I'm going to show that assignment to you real quick. So it's B.2.H. So we give them some ideas of things to think about, differences between linear functions in mathematics and line of best fit for data sets in statistics. And they've already worked with this data set in this module about granola bars and their attributes. So we just get them to start thinking about what's different about the role of context, table of values, the graphs that we make and how we make them, the slope of the lines, the y-intercept of the lines. So really building on things they've talked about math and stats being different, but how does that really play out in this context? We also have them do CODAP-based data investigations. Like I mentioned before, every single part of every single module we made does that. The data sets that we use in ours are about granola bars, thinking about healthy eating and granola bars. The vehicle data set, like I mentioned before, and then we get a data set from the Census at School random sampler. That goes into my last one, which is about, we help our pre-service teachers learn about resources for teaching statistics too. So through that, we're teaching them about the great project called Census at School. If you're not familiar with that, you'll be checking that out in that module. and as well as the American Statistical Association and New York Times project, What's Going On in This Graph. We refer to one of those into the website, which is also, again, a fabulous resource that teachers can use in their teaching of statistics. So we're getting them acquainted with those resources as well. Okay, fast and furious, there you go.
All right, that was impressive.
I'm gonna wrap things up here by teaching you guys how to import everything into your learning management systems and navigate that.
Yep.
But she left you 10 minutes, Taylor.
Yep, I was impressed.
And that's what she was supposed to leave her. My apologies, Stephanie, for taking so much of your time.
It's okay.
All right. So like Stephanie said, we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about the logistics of using these materials, how to get them into your course. So we have packages available for 3 different learning management systems, Moodle, Blackboard, and Canvas. But we also have a common course cartridge, which can be imported into a variety of different LMSs. For example, we have several instructors that have used D2L, Desire to Learn, and that common course cartridge works with that, as well as other various learning management systems. So you've obviously seen the place site. So when you get to the course, this is what your view, and like Holly Lynn said at the beginning, this site is just so you can see how the materials are organized and play around with the materials. But again, this site is not where you or your students will be using the materials. So the way you do that is with these export packages on the right. So we have a Moodle package, a Blackboard package, a Canvas package, and your common course cartridge. And we also have guides, both in text form and in video form, for how to get those materials into your course. But the main thing we want you to remember is that, you know, as Holly mentioned at the beginning, this is all about adapting these materials to your course. So these courses are the materials are written with a Creative Commons license, basically meaning that you can change the materials any way you want, you know, adapt them to your needs, your students. As long as you keep our logo, find some other way to credit us, you're free to adapt these as little or as much as you'd like. So there are some additional resources here to help you get these materials into your course. Obviously, as I mentioned, PDF and video guides. The annotated table of contents that Holly Lynn showed at the beginning is a good place to start. And that will just give you a brief description of all the materials and let you decide which ones you want in your course. And so when you are designing, so there are 3 modules. Each module has 2 parts. So 6 different parts here. And you may want to use all of them. You may want to pick and choose. So these packages include all of the materials. So you don't download specific ones. You download them all. And then when you import them into your course, that's when you select which ones you want. And these guides will show you how to do that. We have a changelog here. So I know at least one of you said you had already downloaded the materials and try to put them into your course. If you've done that before our latest release, which at this point was last month, this changelog has just the most recent changes to the materials to let you decide if you want to re-download them again. So one thing I do want to highlight is, so last year we did a series of webinars, kind of similar to this, where we helped some faculty implement the materials into the course. So we did 3 different webinars. And this first one was on the foundations module and the inferential reasoning module. But we also had some past implementers come and talk about how they adapted the material to their course, to face-to-face course, to a hybrid course. So if you're interested in seeing how past implementers have adapted the material to their course, this is a good webinar to watch. These are all about an hour and a half long, hour and 45 minutes long. We have one on the Statistical Association module. And then we have one that examines some students, pre-service teachers' work that they have produced in using these materials, and some discussions around that. So these are, if you want even more information about these modules, these webinars are a great place to go. Again, so we know that these materials were designed so that they can be used in online courses. Obviously, with the COVID and everything that's going on, more and more classes are going online, but if you are teaching a face-to-face or hybrid course, these materials can certainly be used in those contexts. So for example, if we look at this first module here, again, about 7 to 8 hours worth of material. So some people like to, have an online course that might be, a week's worth of material if you don't have any synchronous sessions. If you do have synchronous sessions, you can maybe do some of these readings, assign them pre-class readings, then maybe watch some of these videos while you're in class together, either face-to-face or in a synchronous setting. Maybe start this investigation, let them finish it at home, come back later that week, and turn some of these discussion boards into whole class in-person discussions. So again, this is all about you adapting the materials into whatever fits your needs. All right. And so we have about 3 or 4 minutes left, so I'm going to turn it back over to, I think, Holly Lynn or somebody for some parting words.
So I think that the parting words are, first of all, thank you for joining us on. For many of you, it's later in the afternoon. For some of you, it's earlier in the afternoon. We really appreciate your interest in this. We hope that you are able to implement it. We will be processing your $250 stipend. So if you hear from Jima Majika or anyone from NC State kind of wanting some paperwork filled out so we can get you paid, please respond to that. And then when you do, let us know when we'll be following up with you to find out when you're going to implement. And then we have a post-faculty survey that we have that after it's just a way to give us feedback and to kind of keep up with you on that. I know a few of you may have some questions, and my internet is unstable.
You're back now.
Okay. Well, I have no idea what you heard. But I did see that there was some chat going on with some questions. So I will just stop because I don't know what got heard or not, and ask for questions.
Deborah, you have some questions you want to ask? I think you may be muted. I can't hear you at least.
Yeah, it doesn't show that you're muted, but we can't hear you.
Try again.
Mm-mm. I wonder if your audio feed is coming in from a different device.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, there was some kind of weird thing got switched on. I was trying to use my USB camera. Anyways, okay, all right. My very specific question has to do with CODAP capabilities and whether or not it can do hypothesis testing or some sort of, nothing, but is there some way to, I really like the models, the simulated models that we have. Is there a way that CODAP can give us all of the possible outcomes for a sample or population? Does that make sense?
So no, it's not going to give you the sampling distribution.
Okay. Oh.
Won't give you all possible, but one of the things that I didn't show was that you can. So like some of the applets that are out there, it would be in an empirical sampling distribution and an empirical p-value.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a couple questions too, if it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I am teaching a synchronous class. My class is synchronous this semester, and I am looking at the table of contents, the detailed one that you have annotated. I guess my question is, what Taylor was talking about, for synchronous, you can pick and choose. Do you have any notes anywhere on what are good things to do in synchronous classes versus some things you might want to put off? I'm starting statistics in a couple of weeks, so anything I can draw on from here, I am so open. I've never taught this course, and as you said, I had one statistics class in college, and that was more than 25 years ago. So I am just a day ahead of the kids. That's all I am right now, even with probability. So I want to do a good job, as good as I can. So I guess I'll stop there and see what you have to say.
Yeah. So we do not have facilitator guides that really kind of talk detail. If you're doing this section in synchronous or asynchronous, like what should you expect? We don't have something like that. Rick, I don't know if the slides, I know that we've talked a little bit in different faculty webinars about that. I don't know if we've got some slides that could be, at least shared or useful or not.
Yeah, I know I have a handout for how I've implemented the foundation module in a face-to-face setting. And so, did you say you're doing it synchronously online? Is that right, Cynthia?
Yes, twice a week, 75 minutes each.
I think you could probably adapt what I've done from a face-to-face setting for a synchronous setting. I can send that to you if you want.
That'd be great. And then Taylor was talking about the Common Course cartridge. So I noticed, I don't have it up on my end right now, but I noticed there were directions for like the Moodle, Blackboard, and Canvas. So I am D2L, Desire to Learn. So I assume I'll be doing the Common Course. Is there directions for that as well?
There isn't, but I would follow the, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the Canvas directions that were the closest to D2L. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Or could my IT people, like
your IT people can definitely.
That's what I would suggest.
Okay. Well, I'm not technologically that literate, so I will probably be going to them anyhow.
Yeah, but yeah, every learning management system has a place where you can import material, and it's, you've got to find where that place is, and then it's basically going to just be taking that file and uploading it. And it should unzip and magically, boo-boo.
Yeah, no, so some LMSs call it like restore from backup. Others call it like import. I mean, they call different things in each one, but there should be something similar to that.
One word of caution there is that you may not want to import everything. For example, Mark knows this, he's online. If you import the assignments in Blackboard, it populates all the assignments in your gradebook. And so we've learned don't import all the assignments right away if you don't want that to be added to your gradebook. But it's not that difficult to delete those assignments either in the gradebook.
But that's a good tip, to go and check your gradebook and see what got populated. I don't know about you all, but I tend to hate the gradebooks in all of these LMSs.
And that's another thing. So none of these assignments will have due dates or anything like that. So if you want to set due dates, make sure after you import the materials, go through and set due dates on the assignments.
How have you guys found that things that were embedded, do they seem to work well when you're importing them into all these different systems?
Yep, nobody has complained.
Yeah, it works great.
Our first approach was to just do the common cartridge, and we found that we had better there were 3 common ones that everybody was using: Moodle, Blackboard, and Canvas. And so we decided to specifically so we rebuild everything in those 3 LMSs so that it works well. Any other questions?
And if other questions come up, feel free to reach out to any of the 4 of us. I know we're glad to answer questions.
Yep.
Sometimes when you get in the moment of actually preparing for the class, you realize there were things you needed to know still, right?
And on the place page, there's also an email on the right side that will go to our, I believe, to our project manager. If I'm mistaken.
Who is Gma?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming tonight.
Thanks, everybody. So nice
Well, one of the things that I said was you should be hearing from people.
You're good now, Hollylyn.